And she is Donna Walcavage, landscape architect with over 35 years experience in the design of urban public spaces. Much of her work has involved design of New York City's redeveloping waterfront. Among her first waterfront projects were the very popular playground in Rockefeller Park in New York City. Other completed waterfront projects include the North Shore Esplanade in Staten Island, and of course Stuyvesant Cove, which we'll speak about tonight. So let's welcome Donna Walcavage. I'm going to talk primarily tonight about Stuyvesant Cove Park, about 99% of the time, and there's going to talk about two other parks in the context of actually getting onto the water. And as Tom pointed out, there are always a lot of people involved in designing any project on the waterfront. And most important, in the way that this park looks and the way we were able to design it, are people who do maintenance. Stuyvesant Cove waterfront runs along the East River on the other side of the FDR, which is this area here, from Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village, from 18th Street to roughly 23rd Street. This is that big gray garage you see from the FDR Drive. And this is the master plan. And when we first went to look at the site, this is what it looked like. This is the FDR Drive. There was a ramp exit, the one that says 21st Street, 23rd Street from the FDR, came down and the service road ran all along the water side of the FDR. It is leased for parking, so it was the parking lot in New York with the best view. There was a platform on the waterfront, and this was pretty much what you did when you got to the water. You ducked through the cars, and eventually you could come out onto this little, what was called the outcrop, which was really concrete that had been, was where all those concrete trucks were washed. They would dump the water into the East River, and eventually, over many years, it just built up this mound of concrete in the water. Waterfront projects were all about access. In this case, we had a duct under the FDR Drive, across the service road, and one of the first things we did was to take the FDR Drive exit and bring it under the drive and connect it to make a northbound area on Avenue C. That's something that came out of a plan that John Shapiro did with Heinz Ruddick, a study for the community. That allowed us to bring a Class 1 bikeway along the waterfront, a planted area with with native plantings, and then the waterfront walkway. In the master plan, we also break down some of the bulkhead wall. This is a really solid, massive granite bulkhead wall. Getting to the water, the main routes are 23rd Street, where eventually we hope to have a wetland at the end. And 20th Street, where actually you can see the water as you're walking down the street, although it's under the FDR Drive, so it's not great visual access. So overall, the master plan includes the two-way Avenue C. We reconfigured the parking under the FDR Drive and this allowed EDC to renegotiate the parking rates, which goes through 2012. The Class 1 bikeway on the other side, a planted area with little pavilions, and then a path along the water. Eventually, a pier, which would allow the environmental center to have a boat. Now, the project, the economics of the project were that we had to provide a revenue stream, and normally you think of that as being some use that throws off a lot of money. In this case, working with the community,
working with EDC, the idea became having an environmental center that would raise the money for the maintenance and get some of the money from the reconfigured parking lease to do the maintenance. And the Community Environmental Center eventually took the RFP. But the whole park was designed with that theme in mind. This is the way it looked right after it was built, and right after it opened in 2002. And these are those elements: the bikeway, some pavilions for people to sit in, and that pathway through the park, through the planted areas, with some boulders that we found on the site. The edges of the planted areas were built up with cobblestones that we found on the site. And then there's a walkway along the waterfront with benches, custom designed benches and tables. So the water, engaging the water's edge, in this case, a lot of it has to do with the views. The way the cove cuts back in as you look uptown, you really see the island is moving around, and you really see a fantastic view of uptown Manhattan. There are places to sit along the waterfront, and the waterfront actually undulates in some places with foreground planting that you can see over. We eventually showed that we're going to break down some of the wall and also create some lower planting beds that would have be tidal marshes and present a different kind of planting. We really needed to stake a claim on this land, and I don't know if I'm not sure we could talk a city agency into taking down a thick granite bulkhead wall that was in excellent condition very quickly when it cost $4,000 a foot to build one. So this is something that we hope to accomplish in the future. The first phase was built, if you can roughly see this straight line, was built on the opposite side, on the land side of the bulkhead wall, and from 18th up to around, this is probably 21st Street, just south of the new where the new environmental center will be built. The pathway undulates. Sometimes you're right on the waterfront. We didn't want a pathway. We wanted to break down that New York idea that you have to have 15 feet straight against the railing, but we didn't have a bulkhead wall to break down, so we undulated the pathway by designing planting beds into the foreground view. And probably the most important part of the waterfront access is that the outdrop, or the old concrete, and we simply fought to keep it. Now that wasn't so simple. DEC really wanted to take it out when they finally engaged with us under a program of wetland mitigation. And eventually the community fought it because this is where everybody likes to go. And won with Amanda Burden's help. The plantings change with the season. This spring and time in the planting beds. The first year was built with some woodland phlox, and then as the summer went on, the grasses have all grown up. It also changes with the length of time that it's been installed, and all too often that changes for the worse. In this case, it's really changed for the better. Because the plantings have really grown up. You can walk down the esplanade, and they've almost blocked out the FDR Drive now. In fact, if you're driving along the FDR Drive, you can catch a glimpse of the leaf every once in a while. So this was an area that was earmarked in the New York City waterfront plan for public access. So that's been achieved, but the version of the plan I looked at still had water siding here, so it's actually better than the plan imagined, and because of the activism of the community. And as far as the Blue Links program that the Metropolitan Waterfront strives for, we've left the outcrop. People often jump over it, but we also put a maintenance gate in. I'm as shocked as Tom is with people walking down the river that occasionally the maintenance gate's left open and people get out there. And I just wanted to mention two more projects because I think that real access to the water is so important. This is the Take Me to the River project, which is a plan for access to the waterfront for West Harlem, the river Bonnie mentioned, we worked on together. And in that, we have come up with at least 3 ways to bring people actually into the water. And we think that's a really important part of the plan. And in the Greenpoint plan, which is also on the East River, we were lucky enough to have a really bad condition, a relieving platform in bad condition, which is going to allow us to really engage the waterfront in a different way, take out the relieving platform, use riprap, dig out an old ferry slip, and create a different waterfront environment. And Jonathan was about his floating pool. It may go right here.
Let's welcome Jonathan Kirschenfeld.
Thank you, Bonnie. I'm actually going to be the briefest speaker because I'm talking about a project as opposed to an entire waterfront development. This is a project called the Floating Swimming Pool, and even though it's 250 feet by 80 feet wide, it has taken us 7 years to get to the point of construction. So even for a smaller project on the waterfront, approvals, fundraising, all the things that the larger projects need to confront are also things that this as an architectural project had to face. New York City at the turn of the century, and we're just doing a little history here, had about 15 floating bathhouses they were called. These were rectangular structures set on pontoons that were moored off of existing piers, and mostly off of piers along tenement districts. And these structures, in essence, were rectangular donuts. They had a center portion cut out. The river water came through a series of wooden slats so the kids swimming in the river wouldn't be pulled out. And they were an opportunity for the neighborhoods to both bathe, as you can imagine there were not great sanitary facilities available, and also learn to swim. This is an image of what we're calling the 21st century floating pool. In about 1991, and Buttenwieser, who was also an important figure in the Parks Council, formed something called the Neptune Foundation, which was a not-for-profit and is a not-for-profit group that's dedicated to raising money and constructing floating swimming pools. We're hoping that this isn't the only one that gets built because we think that there's a need in the neighborhoods around New York City for pool facilities that cannot be afforded in upland areas. And in fact, this project has a budget of $3.5 million. I'm also working while I'm an architect, and Bonnie explained I do a lot of work for publications agencies, I have never designed a swimming pool on a barge before. So we're learning a lot about it, and have hired Charles Cushing as our marine engineer, and Joel Trace Architects as our pool consultant. He does a lot of the pools around New York. But we're all having a very fascinating 7 years putting a pool on a barge and then getting to regulatory procedures. The pool itself, as I described, is 250 feet long, 80 feet wide. That's the barge, rather. The pool itself is 25 meters long and 50 feet wide. It's a funny thing about pools. A pool facility isn't just about swimming. It's also about the process and the sequence of getting the pool, coming in, changing, showering, sunning, etc. So while the pool itself seems very small in comparison to the barge, I like the idea of this being a kind of urban compilation of spatial experiences. This would be, it's also a kind of plug-in piece. It's meant to go anywhere. It's a migrating recreation pier, if you will. In this situation, has 2 gangways that connect to the land-based promenade. You enter into a large porch, and then to the security checkpoint, where you either flash your card or pay a small fee. Anne's idea is that this is essentially free to school kids. And then at night, it becomes a little bit more of a swim club, pay as you swim. These are changing rooms arranged around what we call the sun court. There's a big splash pad in the center with spray, which should be spraying out of this section. And then stepping up to a raised dining court with, of course, a snack bar where you get your ice cream sandwiches and hot dogs. This raised court is about 4 feet above the actual pool deck. So parents can sit here, sit and have a snack and watch over the pool deck and see their kids swimming. The actual route is more elaborate and we like to think very exciting, where you come in and change in the room. You are required by DOH to pass by all the showers on the way down to the pool. And then you slip down a long ramp down to the pool deck itself. There are 2 pavilions for shade and stadium seating back here for watching a sort of meaningful race. So I'll just basically go through the story of the barge. This, you're looking at C500, that's the name of a used barge that the Neptune Foundation purchased last summer after searching for several months. This is an old river barge that used to tow grain and a variety of other materials up and down Mississippi. The idea in terms of construction and stage is that we hollow out the barge for the pool. We're then adding a series of columns to hold up a large canopy. Within the columns are arranged a series of pavilions, and then finally, in the last shot, the canopy sits over, forming the U-shaped courtyard, and you can see the deck of the, there's the deck of the dining terrace where you look out over. So, part of the interest of the project is the way in which it uses the materials of a typical marine boatyard. It's all steel, and it's all made using boatyard technology. This took us a very, very long time to learn. We've done a whole set of drawings, got to the boatyard, they said this is the way we do it, this is the way we do it, we came back, we did it. Miraculously, it seemed like much more work. We produced it, the price came down about 25%. And then the fact is that the only way that we can build something like this at the 3.5 budget is by building it down south. So the barge was purchased in Louisiana, and then we found a boatyard in Morgan City, Louisiana, about 1 hour west. New Orleans, and Greenpoint is the ultimate goal. That the Greenpoint waterfront is at least where we felt this this sort of migrating pier would find its first home. But for the time being, we've got a couple of options. This may turn out to be a very interesting interim waterfront for all that wonderful planning that we're anticipating coming online in 5 or 6 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. This is an instant waterfront that can be used in each of those locations over the next several years while things are in construction. That will bring people down to the waterfront, will make people aware that a waterfront is on its way, and provide a terrific summer activity. Its mooring is an issue. Right now we're considering what's called a spudding system, which is the way most barges are moored in New York City, which allows the barge to move up and down with the tide, but does not allow it to move laterally. And in all cases, we're hoping that its ultimate home will allow it to be moored as a pier for a variety of reasons, meaning perpendicular to the shore, and that will help us a great deal with weights from boats coming in and not hitting the long side but the short side. It's just a little detail of a model showing some of the cladding around these little pavilions. These pavilions sit as though they're cabanas under a big roof. You can see these little shaped roofs here. They have openings at the top. It's a rather peculiar idea of a little building under a bigger building, but we feel that light will be able to bounce off the underside of these galvanized roofs and then find its way down into the variety of rooms through that opening at the top. Obviously, the big canopy on top prevents rain from going directly into a changing room, for example, but it should allow light to come in and provide a shaped sense of space. This is a little image of what we think it might look like. I'd like to think of this as a piece of the working waterfront. It's obviously the pavilions are small one-story structures, but while Greenpoint will look very different than this in the next 5 or 6 years, the idea is that it's made out of steel and steel sections seems to me to suggest that it is part of the old New York City water. In any case, this is what we hope it looks like on July 4th when it arrives in its East River home. We're hoping to have a huge party that you're all invited to, but it will be an extremely difficult and expensive ticket, but I think that should help defray some of the costs of operating the pool. The last two images, I just threw in out of vanity because this is a project that I have tried to get built that preceded the swimming pool. And I think maybe one of the reasons I got hired to do the swimming pool is because I had been through the regulatory processes. This has a permit. It's an outdoor theater that is like a La Scala on the river that is also supposed to make the rounds. And the next shot shows it set as an outdoor movie house underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. So first the pool, but then hopefully a whole bunch of other activities.